Hello, everyone. My name is Johanna Landström, and I'm an intuitive health coach. And I guide my clients to reconnect to themselves so that they can heal and create a healthy body that they love holistically. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about how we create our own stress, often unknowingly, and how to avoid it sabotaging our health and our body. So how do we create our own stress? Well, we do that with our mind, specifically with our thoughts and our mindset. And today we're going to look at three examples, three ways in which we create our own stress, specifically through our saboteur interference. So the first one is how we sabotage through the meaning we make of things that happen, or the meaning we make of things, of something that what someone does or says. And the second way we create our own stress is through disempowering thoughts and beliefs. And the third one is through moving too fast. I can very much relate to this one. I used to walk through doors before I have even had a chance to fully open them. So I used to walk around with bruises all over. So those are the three ones we'll be covering today. So let's look at the first one, the meaning we make of things that happen. So stressful events are, of course, part of life. There is no one who can escape, stress triggers or stressful events, because that's just part of life, right? But it's actually how we react to stressful events that determines our own stress level, not the actual event in itself. And sometimes I think we forget this. We can actually train our mind, we can train our brain to react differently or to respond differently to a stress trigger or to a stressful event. And I will be sharing a detailed formula on how to do this in a little bit. So this is usually how it goes. Something happens, there is some sort of sensory input, and then we might see something, we might hear something, and then we give it meaning. So as humans, we're almost like these little meaning-making machines. Ever since we are very little, we create meaning of the things that happen. And then we react based upon the meaning that we just placed on what happened. So we respond with the behavior. And a lot of the time, we respond from saboteur mode, which means the meaning we place on what happens or on what someone says or does not serve us a lot of the time, but instead creates negative feelings and stress. You might recognize yourself. I mean, I was very much like this before, always thinking the worst, what people will think and say or whatever. And that creates negative feelings and stress. So we can also take another example, like let's say someone cuts us off in traffic, right? We're driving, we might be in a hurry and someone cuts us off. So we can choose here in this situation to interpret this as the other driver is an idiot, out to get us, out to make us angry, right? Which would feed the stress response and likely make us angry or upset. Or we can choose to interpret this from our sage perspective of compassion. Perhaps this driver is feeling unwell or on his way to the hospital with his pregnant wife in the back seat. Who knows, right? So we do have a choice here. So let's move on to the second way we create our own stress, through disempowering thoughts and beliefs. So first, I just want to mention that the thoughts are not really the problem. It's us believing in these thoughts that is the problem. And there is a paradigm that I hold this true in my coaching practice, and that is we always win the game we're playing. So if we play the game of there is never enough time, right, then that is the game that we will be winning. And we will constantly be feeling behind or feeling the lack of time, which creates stress. It almost becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or maybe you're one of those people who play the game of I will never lose this weight because of my age, or because it's been like this for so long, or because I've tried so many things and nothing really worked in the long run, or whatever other reason you have, hormones or whatever it is, then that is the game that you will be winning. All right, so let's look at a thought behavior loop that kind of feeds stress. So there is often some sort of external stimuli, as we mentioned in the previous example. For example, we might catch a glimpse of ourselves, a reflection of ourselves in the mirror, and that then prompts or generates a thought. For example, how did I put on this weight? What happened? And that prompts an emotion. For example, frustration, embarrassment, disappointment, and that prompts a behavior. So in some cases, it can go something like, I'm already overweight, I might as well eat that cake. Just F it, right? Like some of you might be able to relate to this. And in these types of situations, what happens to quite a lot of us is that, you know, we try to avoid the uncomfortable emotion that the thought generated. And this is something that oftentimes happens below our awareness. It's not like we consciously walk around thinking, oh, I don't want to feel this feeling, so now I'm going to go grab some chips or whatever it is, right? It often happens below our awareness. And ironically, in these types of situations, what we reach for is processed carbs, sugar, alcohol, caffeine, you know, all these things that ironically also create stress to the body when we eat them. So it just adds on to the stress level. And I just want to point out here that it's really important to note that an emotion is really just our body's response to our mind. And the only purpose of an emotion is to be truly felt. That's it. Yet most of us, or a lot of us, are in the habit of avoiding being present with the emotions that we feel. And we suppress the anger, the sadness, the grief, the frustration, the shame, which can lead to physical stress on our body and even disease. So we can take charge of our mind and activate one of our sage powers and reframe any stress-inducing thoughts or beliefs. Like, for example, there's never enough time. You can reframe that to, there's not enough time for everything, but there is enough time for the most important things. All right, so we've come to the last point of how we create our own stress, which is moving too fast. And when we move through life too fast, then we inevitably eat too fast, which negatively affects our digestion and our metabolism. And digestive stress is about 25% what we eat and 75% who we're being when we eat or how we eat. And we can eat the healthiest meal on the planet, but if we eat when we're in a stressed, anxious state, for example, multitasking as we eat, eating on the go, eating too fast, then our digestion, our calorie and fat burning powers are dramatically diminished, which also means that our body won't be able to assimilate the nutrients properly from the food that we eat. The slower we eat, the faster we metabolize. And when we're stressed, most of you are familiar, I'm sure, with the hormone cortisol. So when we're stressed, the hormone cortisol is secreted in the body. And increased cortisol in the body leads to fat accumulation. And people who tend to gain weight primarily around the belly area, they often experience chronic low-level stress, as cortisol has this weird effect of fattening up the belly. So what we want is, we want the parasympathetic branch of the central nervous system to be turned on, which is the rest and digest response, which is the optimal state for digestion, metabolism, and nutrient assimilation. So what do we do then about all this stress that we create for ourselves in our mind? Well, it's important to mention here that we might create a lot of the mental stress with our mind, but that doesn't mean that we can resolve it using our mind alone. We need to use our body too. And I want to share 3 tools with you that I love, that I use all the time. And what I love about them is they're free, you can use them anywhere, and they're easy to use, but also the fact that you can use them on the go to kind of like intercept saboteur thoughts and choosing a different response to a stress trigger. And the more you intercept a sabotaging, stress-inducing thought and reframe it, you train your mind to kind of like, it's not, eventually once you do that consistently, you're not even going to go there after a while. It's going to be your new normal not to think in those stressful ways. So let's look at the first tool. So the first tool is actually it's a shortcut, actually. It's a shortcut to trick the central nervous system to believe we're in a relaxed state, even when we're not. And we do this by using our breath and using a conscious breathing, and specifically a breathing technique that's called the 5-5-7 breath. And so this is kind of like how it works. So when we're feeling stressed or anxious and we adopt a deep rhythmic breathing pattern that's really characteristic of being in a relaxed state, we fool the central nervous system to believe that, that we're in a relaxed state. So the brain will go something like, hey, I thought I was a nervous wreck, but I'm breathing like a relaxed person, so I must be relaxed. And so it switches on the parasympathetic branch of the central nervous system. And we enter the rest and digest state, which is the state of slow, we shift. By adopting this breathing technique, we shift from a state of slow metabolism, poor digestion, poor nutrient assimilation to a state of full digestive force, fat burning, and healing. We cannot heal when we're in a stress state. That's impossible because the parasympathetic portion of the central nervous system, that's the healing state. That's the relaxed state. We cannot heal if we have the sympathetic portion of the central nervous system turned on. So how do we do this breathing technique? So we inhale and exhale through the nose, and we inhale to the count of 5. We hold our breath to the count of 5, and then we exhale to the count of 7. And it's important that the exhale is a little bit longer than the inhale and the hold. And no worries if you can't get it to be to the count of 7, the first few goes, because it can take some time. And one little trick can be to use your stomach muscles to kind of like help push the air out of your stomach and your lungs. That can really help to make it longer. And as you go through this breathing, I highly encourage you to tune into all the bodily sensations. Notice the air entering the nostrils, entering and exiting the nostrils. Notice how your eyelids feel on your eyes. Become very present in the body while you do this breathing technique, and notice any sensations. And I have a hot tip here to use this breathing technique before a meal. Because if you want to be able to use up the nutrients from the food and be able to digest the food properly, that you need to be in a relaxed state. And sometimes it's almost like being in a stress state becomes the normal, the normal way of being for us. It's like almost like an identity, right? And so sometimes we're not even aware that we're walking around in a constant state of low level stress, right? So the second tool that's a short one, it's actually the second tool that I use is gratitude. And gratitude, it's not about writing a gratitude list for the things you're grateful for, which can also be great, of course. But gratitude, really what it does when it's done properly, it moves us into the present moment. And we cannot be stressed if we're completely present in the moment. And when it comes to writing down a list for the things that we're grateful for, that's great. But we also have to actually feel the feeling of gratitude, that moving from our headspace to just saying, oh, I'm grateful for this, doesn't do anything. We have to actually feel, I'm so grateful for this, feeling it in our body, right? And moving from our headspace to our heart space, using both our, the right and left half of our brain in order to experience the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual benefits of gratitude and enter into a relaxed state. And I have a hot tip here too. I noticed at the end of last year, I was complaining a lot about all different sorts of things. Doing all these laundry I have to do and folding socks, which I hate, by the way. And then I came up with this. I don't like being in this low vibrational state of complaining, right? So I came up with a plan that whenever I noticed myself complaining in my mind or out loud, I would shift it. I would switch it up to something that I'm grateful for. So now when I'm like, oh, I have to empty the dishwasher or whatever, then I thought I'm grateful that I switch it into something to be grateful for related to that complaint. So for example, I would say, I'm grateful that I have a family to cook for, that I have a family to wash clothes for. Because if I didn't have that, I would probably be complaining about that too, right? So at some stage, we need to kind of like realize, put a stake in the ground and just intercept these types of habits that we create for ourselves. All right. And I also want to mention that you will be receiving a handout that specifies these 3 tools in detail also, so you don't have to worry about remembering everything right now. So the third tool that I have is it's a simple boost your self-command formula to intercept saboteur thoughts. So basically it's a way to change your response to a stress trigger, whether it be generated by a thought or something else. So the first prerequisite for using this self-command formula is awareness. We need to pour awareness, because if we're not aware of something, we can obviously not do anything about it, right? If we don't have awareness, we have no choice but to continue on in our old habituated pattern of autopiloting through life, right? So awareness, what it does, it creates space between the trigger and our reaction. And this space then opens up choice. And we will be able to choose a different response to stress as opposed to just respond how we normally. You might be aware that there is 3 ways we can respond to stress: either enter, fight, flight, or freeze. So I'm a fighter, most definitely. So if my kids like cause havoc and fight, I would always scream before. Now I've trained myself and trained my mental muscles to be so much better. It takes time, right? But so much better. I'm not triggered as much. And this is an interesting fact also. As parents, it can be interesting to know that when we are in a stressed state as parents, we force our children to enter a stress state also. And when a child is in a stress state, their prefrontal cortex cannot work. And this is the executive part of the brain where we use reasoning. And so it's almost like, and the reptilian brain gets turned on. And so a child who's in a stress state, because a parent is stressed, it's not going to be able to behave well or listen well or follow instructions, right? So we really do ourselves a big favor by managing our own stress. Anyhow, back to the formula for choosing a different response to stress. Pouring awareness is the first one. And that can help us, when we pour awareness, help us identify stress trigger that might be recurring in our life, right? Maybe something we hear, something we think, something we feel, something that happens. Like if my kids fight, then, that is something that we have to pour a lot of awareness into. So just pour awareness is the first step. The second one is pattern interrupt. So when you become aware of a stress-inducing trigger, kids screaming, whatever it is, pattern interrupt using one of your senses. For example, one thing that I use a lot is rubbing the tips of my fingers together. So imagine my kids scream and go all crazy. I do this before I even go and deal with whatever is going on. I do this. I breathe, and then I rub this, because what it does, it brings us into the body. For 10 seconds, I do this. It helps to also breathe into the belly, not just the lungs when you do this. And when appropriate, it's not always, when appropriate, it's important to see if we can be with the emotion that this stress trigger generates, and not try to push it down or avoid it, but not letting it linger for too long. We don't need to be in the emotion for more than 10 to 60 seconds. Any more than that, we can get like snowball into, what was a bad moment could snowball into a bad day, to a bad week, to a bad month, right? So this is something that's part of a PQ rep that I call a PQ rep. It's part of building up your mental muscle to respond differently to a stress trigger, for example. And the third step of this formula is to choose again. So in this space that has been created between the stress trigger, and your reaction to the stress trigger, you have a choice of becoming more resourceful to activate one of your sage powers and reframe any stress-inducing thoughts, to consciously choose to make a more supportive meaning of what happens, to slow down, or to ask yourself a question. Is this reaction in alignment with how I want to feel? Is this food aligned with my health goal? Is this food aligned with how I want to feel? So using this formula will reactivate your self-command so that you are more in charge of your thoughts and actions and emotions than your saboteurs. Thank you so much for checking out this video. And I just want to mention that, of course, as I mentioned, You have the handout with these techniques. I would love to hear how it goes. If you try it, I would love to hear how you like it or how it works for you. So please comment on this video. And I also wanted to mention another thing. So another very important role, since I work with people who want to create a healthy body that they love, another very important aspect of that is toxicity in the body and toxins. And that is another physical stressor to the body. And most, like so many, if not the majority of disease and symptoms that we see nowadays, including weight gain or, you know, is linked to toxicity in the body. And so I've been inspired to create, to run one of my 14-day reset cleanses again, where we exclude the most common irritants and allergens, and we focus on a whole foods, plant-based diet, but you also have the option of going for some organic meats if that's what you really want to do. And if you're interested in this, please comment under this video or just reach out to me via message. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll speak to you soon again. Thank you.